Hey everybody, welcome to Into the Necrosphere. I am going to be joined very shortly by Brother Marco of the beastly and barbaric Stellar Master Elite to begin the countdown of my top 50 favorite death metal bands. And as I said to you last week, 3 things I can guarantee about this list. 1, next to no melody. 2, absolutely no core. And 3, from the very top to the very bottom, absolutely no wimping out.
The death metal band should always get heavier and faster. Never fucking wimping, man. Never wimping out.
Speaking of those who don't wimp, my demo of the week is a group out of Ecuador called Sucurbenoth. They reached out to me on Twitter and steered me in the direction of their first full-length, a record called Blasphemy's Vengeance. Now, technically, because this is a full-length album, it's not a demo, but they are unsigned, and so therefore I decided that they qualify for my demo of the week because I liked what I heard. This is a track off of Blasphemy's Vengeance. It's called Bloodstorm.
Burning
that was Bloodstorm by Sucurbenoth out of Ecuador. Potentially Ecuador's finest death metal exports, although I'm not really sure about any other death metal bands in Ecuador. I'm sure there are. But I liked what I heard from Sucurbenoth, and like I said, I wanted to share it with all of you guys. The full-length record, as I mentioned, is called Blasphemy's Vengeance. I will stick a link to their YouTube and Bandcamp pages in the description of this podcast. And if you do end up buying anything that they produce, if the unholy spirit moves you to do so, then do let them know that Into the Necrosphere sent you. And if you're in a band and you want to bask in the sort of glory and adulation that only a spot on my demo of the week can provide, then send me your best work to intothenecrosphere@gmail.com, or hook up with me on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. And if I like what I hear, I'll feature it on the show. And if I really like what I hear, I will feature you on the show, as I did with John Wilcox of the Mighty Master's Call a couple of episodes back. And speaking of guests, I just want to say thank you to everybody for the just phenomenal support for last week's show that I did with Ghoul from Mayhem. It was, in terms of viewing numbers and downloads, by far the best episode that I've ever done. And then on top of that, I had a bunch of people send me messages, just super positive, very supportive of the show. And, that sort of thing is exactly why I do this. So I thoroughly appreciate, everybody that took the time to send a message or drop me a comment on social media. Hopefully, it's just going to get better and better from here. Next week, I've got Kevin Sharp of Brutal Truth, Lockup, and Venomous Concept on the show with me. And that's an interesting one because I wasn't 100% sure what to expect, because I've never actually met him before. You're kind of always, or at least I am always, a little anxious beforehand as to whether there's going to be any chemistry and whether we're going to get on. But from minute one, we just clicked and connected, and he just turned out to be an absolutely awesome guy to talk to. It was one of the most honest interviews I think I've ever conducted. And if you're unsure of what that means, then you'll have to tune in next week. But what I will say is I walked away from that conversation feeling very inspired, and actually probably being more of a fan of Kevin's than I was going in. So I'm looking forward to sharing that with all of you. No reviews or news this week, purely because my and Marco's hijinks probably went on a little longer than planned. So I figured I'm not going to inundate you guys with a 4-hour episode, but that will be back on next week's show as well. And then the other thing that I wanted to say thank you for is everybody that went on to Teespring and bought a Into the Necrosphere t-shirt or a face mask. I sold a couple. If you did buy something and you wear it on social media, then do tag the show. But again, thank you very, very much to everybody that did check that out. If you haven't done so already, go on to teespring.com and have a gander at the t-shirts or the soon-to-be infamous black metal as fuck face mask. You'll actually see me come up with the idea for that on the show, which was amusing. And there's another idea that I'm mulling around with as well, as far as Marco was concerned, that I talk about on this episode too. But, any money that I make out of that is not to fund my lavish lifestyle or my Lamborghini. That is going to be purely to upgrade various things about the show, whether it's buying a green screen for the background, upgrading the microphone. It's all to the benefit of you guys at the end of the day. On that note, I think I have pretty much said what I need to. I hope that you guys all enjoy the show. Like I said, this is the start of my countdown of my favorite 50 death metal bands. It's going to be a 5-parter, most likely. It might end up being a 6-parter, depending on who I get to do the top 10 with me. But I'm pretty confident that you guys are going to enjoy it. And once again, thanks very much for tuning in. You're in the New Look Mean Street Studios, which as it happens, is a whole 45-degree turn away from the old Mean Street Studios.
New angle is always good.
Yeah. Well, it's temporary, but obviously when we move, in the new place that we're moving to, my girlfriend has, or let's say the place has enjoyed a woman's touch when it comes to decorations. I think I may potentially need to consider doing a green screen behind me or something and having
underwater
some fucking satanic back alley thing there, because otherwise the other option is I'll just go sit outside with like the barbecue cooking next to me and I'll start doing my interviews that way. But how's it been going, man? We haven't actually properly spoken for a while.
Yeah, fine. So yeah, as fine as it can be, you know,
Yeah.
in all these times, and yeah. But
what is the latest with the lockdown in your neck of the woods?
There's no lockdown anymore. You just have to wear your mask, and then it's fine. Restaurants open, pubs are open, as it used to be. Just no concerts.
And the sex clubs in Berlin, are they open again? Because I know that was crucial to many visitors and many residents of the city as well.
Never been to a sex club in Berlin.
Really?
But really? Why not?
Yeah, no. Well, so it's they've now deployed what would have been my policy all along, which is, you know, the strong survives. We roll the dice and the strong survives.
Something like that. Are we already recording, by the way?
We are indeed, mate.
Oh shit! Can you hear my fan next to me?
No, I cannot, and I have a fan in the background as well. If that bothers anybody, they can suck it. So, I am going to amongst the many upgrades I'm making to Mean Street Studios and to the show generally. I am going to get myself a new microphone too. So I've decided the old Blue Yeti is going to be retired at some point, and I'll get myself one of those Rode Broadcaster microphones. I'm probably still going to stick with the USB route, just because there's so many fucking XLR cables lying around in this house. I just can't cope with more with more boxes and more machinery and more crap. So
I know that problem. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but you know, apparently the Rode sounds very good. So I think that's going to be cool. And then you know, by the time that this podcast is edited and it goes live, the new explosive intros and outro screen will be up. And obviously we've got Christoph's fucking grim logo.
It's really good, by the way.
Yeah. Well, now all I need to do now is I need to start designing, you know, various bits of women's underwear, and then there'll be the merchandise for perverts and the 3 women that listen to the podcast regularly. All right, so before we start with the countdown of the top 50 greatest death and grind bands of all time, some have called it the hardest list ever. What's new with Stellar Master Elite?
Not so much. Yeah, we try to rehearse as much as we can, but there's not much progress so far, but we will get there.
How come?
But, yeah, because my bandmate became a father, and we have that Corona shit and work, obviously, and yeah.
So far,
it's not
I've
that
heard 2 excuses so far. None of them will get you any slack cut, as far as I'm concerned. No, yeah, I know how it goes. I had me a young'un 6 years ago, so you know that when as soon as that kid arrives, your priorities shift dramatically.
Yeah, it's yeah, it's not that frequent anymore, but it didn't get less intense. Let's say that.
Yeah. No, so, you know, he'll be just wait until the baby starts eating solid food and before you guys work on the next record, because the stench raping his nostrils every time he has to change a nappy will be enough to create the appropriate atmosphere for black metal. So I was thinking, because I know we did we did 2 of the episodes on the black metal countdown, but you know, much of that was just a bunch of fucking ranting and raving. So I thought we'll at least attempt to curate this list a little bit better. But as you know, the list has gone through many different iterations and revisions. And so, you know, this is kind of where it's sticking for now, but, you know, probably next month, my view on things will be completely different. So this is what it's like for now. I'll quickly lay out what my criteria has been for putting together the list. So point number one, it needs to the band in question needs to have predominantly been a death metal band for the majority of their career. So I haven't included bands like Gojira, Paradise Lost, Opeth, bands that I like very much. I mean, Paradise Lost in particular. But I don't see them as being a death metal band really. If it were like an all genres list, then there would most certainly be Paradise Lost probably up at the very top. But for this list, they have to be death metal, they have to be hard. And in terms of the question about, I guess, genre influence versus my enjoyment, I very much lean towards the latter. I don't really give a shit about genre influence, which is why you're going to find a lot of melodic death metal bands completely absent from this list. This is bands that I enjoy, and it's based on what I tend to listen to most frequently in the here and now. So that is what the list is based on. And the first band on my list at number 50 is the grindcore, or one of the grandparents of grindcore, Terrorizer. So a couple of facts on Terrorizer, in case nobody knows. Terrorizer started way back in 1986 when yours truly was a 6-year-old whippersnapper based out of Los Angeles in California. They boasted a fucking star-studded lineup, which included David Vincent, Pete Sandoval, both of Morbid Angel, and then Jesse Pintado, may God rest his soul, who went on to play with Napalm Death and unfortunately passed away. I think it's probably about 8 or 9 years now.
Yeah.
I think the reason, or one of the main reasons that I included them was principally down to their first record, which was Will Downfall, that came out in 1989. But I have to say, in pulling together this list, and it's one of the things that I find so much fun about doing this, it forces you to go deep on some of the back catalogs of the bands that you're including, and even some of the things that they've put out after Will Downfall. As a matter of fact, their last record, Caustic Attack, I actually think is really, really good, especially now that I'm revisiting it. But thoughts on Terrorizer, just kind of as a preamble, because I'm pretty confident as a drummer you will have some very strong thoughts on the Commando.
Yes, of course. I admire Pete Sandoval, of course, and first time I got in touch with them was indeed World Downfall, and actually I didn't follow them quite as much afterwards, but when I saw them live in my hometown. And Pete was sitting behind his drum kit after his back surgery or what he has. It was amazing. It was just a blast from the past.
Yeah. He's very much like when he was with Morbid Angel. He really was like one of the few drummers that was, kind of such a star and had such a reputation. He got an almost louder pop when he walked onto the audience. At least in my experience, I think I saw him 3 times. Than a lot of the other guys in the band. I remember the first time that I saw them was back in 2003, and this was right around the time that Heretic had come out. And all the guys in the band walked on stage, and everyone applauded. But then, as soon as he sat down, he kind of held up his drum, he held up his sticks, and everyone was like, "Ah!" He went fucking crazy. And then he does a bit of a blast for a while, and then off they went. But yeah, in listening to World Downfall again in particular, it's actually astounding how far ahead of his time he was in terms of speed, in terms of the way that he manages fills, changeovers. He's one of the few fast drummers, not few fast drummers, but I would say he's in a select group of drummers that predominantly play really, really fast, but never sound monotonous. Because he's always doing something interesting. It's never too flash like you get sometimes with technical death metal bands, but it's always interesting. It always keeps your attention.
It's because it's in my opinion, it always sounds natural, and it sounds always like I said, natural. Because he's not a very clean drummer, as I would say, because he was never polished on any record. he just blasted his heart out.
Yeah.
And I think he was one of the first ones to do it.
Well, there was that interview of his that I was actually looking for it because I was going to play it so we could hear it. But there was this one interview that I think is like back in 2001 or 2002. I stand to be corrected on the date, but he sounded like he was high as a fucking kite. First of all, on the interview,
I guess he was, but
then he's like, yeah, 1989, I started the blast beat. There was no one playing like that before. It was fucking hysterical. He's like, someone on YouTube called him the Tony Montana of death metal drumming. And I don't disagree. Although nowadays he's blasting for Jesus. And to his credit, he seems to be very, very serious about his religion. Usually when somebody turns to the Lord, I expect the meth overdose article to show up about maximum of 2 years later, and that hasn't happened with him.
I think he's a bit too obsessive about his newfound peace somehow. Yeah, but. Well, he's still a great drummer, but
I was about to say he's still making good music. And can you imagine that guy playing drums in the church band? Right, put up your hands for the Lord, and then he comes up.
Do you know that video? Like this drummer is at the wrong gig. Where this guy plays in that wedding band and he's waving his sticks around.
I don't know, but
I send it to you afterwards.
All right, So Terrorizer, I think they definitely would have needed to be on this list regardless. Will Downfall, for a lot of people, including the show's namesake, Jeremy Wagner from Broken Hope, and I say namesake because obviously the show is named after a Broken Hope track. I know Will Downfall is, I think, his favorite record of all time. So had to include it, and I am going to play a track off the record right now. This is a track called "Fear of Napalm." So at number 49, probably one of my only inclusions as far as, like really overtly technical death metal is concerned, because if there's one thing that I dislike almost as much as melodic death metal, it's death metal that sounds like fucking Steve Vai and a jazz drummer decided to start a band, and they just had a vocalist yelling over it for fucking 35 minutes. However, the next band, Origin, I think they're one of the few bands to nail the technical side of things, but never forget the fact that they are that they're actually busy writing and performing actual songs.
True.
So they've been around since 1997. Started off in Topeka, Kansas. Their technical skill we'll talk about in a second, but absolutely astounding. They've put out, I think, 6 records. Of which probably the biggest album that they put out was Echoes of Decimation, which came out in 2005. Their third record, Antithesis, came out in 2007. That's my favorite record. But again, we can talk about that in a second. And they've been relatively quiet. They kind of seem to have taken longer and longer as the years have gone on to put out anything. Their last full-length album, I believe, was Unparalleled Universe, which came out in 2017. I must confess, had that album been of the same caliber, in my opinion, as Antithesis and Entity, and maybe even Echoes of Decimation, this band would have been rated far higher. But as it is, I think it's a fair inclusion at number 49. Your thoughts on Origin and just, I guess, kind of technical death metal as a whole?
Yeah, I speak for myself as a drummer again, and I think I never saw something more brutal than John Longstreth on drums live. I think that was one of the few shows I was standing like, that guy was not sweating at all after 45 minutes of what he does, and it was just amazing.
Yeah.
And all of them are so fucking skilled.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
I mean, you listen to the riffs, and the cool thing is, instead of just a bunch of fucking sweeping arpeggios or whatever the hell it's called, they actually do write honest to goodness riffs. The riffs just happen to be extraordinarily technical, and something that if you put a guitar in front of 95% of the planet and told them you can practice every single day for the next 10 years, they probably still wouldn't be able to master them.
Yeah, true.
So, and they were one of those bands where there was a lot of hype around them based purely on the fact that a lot of bands started wearing their T-shirt. Because I remember the reason I started paying any attention to them whatsoever was I saw Eric Rutan wearing an Origin T-shirt, and Alex Webster had one on a couple of photos as well, and I was like, well, if these dudes like them, they must be worth checking out. So, shows the power of good merchandise. Yeah, which, by the way, now that I've got a new logo, I'm going to be doing merchandise, as I said before. So, women's underwear.
Count me in.
Women's underwear, dog hoodies, and COVID-19 face masks.
I will buy everything.
Well, you know what I was thinking, actually, with a COVID-19 face mask. We were talking last night about strap lines. Maybe for the COVID-19 face mask, you'd have the logo and then black metal as fuck on the front.
Yes. And what I wanted to add about Origin is that those guys are so down to earth. It's unbelievable, because after that concert I was referring about earlier, the John Longstreth came out after he disassembled his drum kit on his own, and I was standing there and I was like, thank you. And he was like, oh, fuck off, man. It's like, okay.
No, I as you know, I'm not a fan of bands doing anything with their own instruments on stage. I think that
no, afterwards.
Well, nothing. I don't want the idea of them doing anything to ever enter my mind. I think it's one of the
but
most.
Why? That's the most natural thing as a musician.
it keeps it destroys the mystery for me. I want the mystery there, and you don't have that if the band is out on stage doing their own thing, and or setting up their own instruments and stuff like that. So, but anyway, I think that one other thing I just say about them that I really like is they're one of the few bands where their instrumentals are absolutely fucking top notch. On Omnipresent, especially, there's some really, really cool instrumentals. And actually, I'm going to play a track off of Omnipresent. So this is the 6th album by Origin, the first track on the album, and this is called All Things Dead. By the way, on that Omnipresent record, I don't think it was on. I actually think I got a promo of this way back in the day, and it didn't have this cover on. But I noticed when I was looking it up on Metal Encyclopedia that they actually did a cover of SOD's "Kill Yourself," which
really? I don't know that one.
I mean, it's not anything I'd expect them to ever have recorded, but it's a fucking cool tune. And if I were ever in a band, I'd have an entire encore dedicated especially to all the most politically incorrect SOD tracks ever. Kill Yourself, Speak English or Die, Fuck the Middle East. All right, so at number 48, Brutal Truth. So Brutal Truth is a tale of two halves for me, because if we kind of set the scene first. So again, In case you don't know, in which case you're probably not cult enough for this show, but Brutal Truth were formed in 1990. They feature the bass stylings of one Dan Lilka, who was in an early incarnation of Anthrax. Obviously, he was with Nuclear Assault, and we just mentioned SOD. He was with Stormtroopers of Death as well. But Brutal Truth for me, why I say they're a tale of two halves. Their first two records are absolutely stunning, and then everything just turns into a pile of fucking bullshit buried under a haze of weed smoke. What are your thoughts on them?
Well, I like the extreme conditions demand extreme responses.
Yes.
Was it? Yeah. I like that one. And afterwards I didn't listen to them that much anymore, except for live gigs, because they're a fucking great live band.
I've heard that, and there's a couple of bands that I'm going to talk about, further up this list, where I would very often say to somebody that's a death metal skeptic, or doesn't necessarily think a band is as good as I'm making them out to be. It's like, well, you need wait till you see the band live, because as soon as you do that, you're going to get why I think so highly of them. And unfortunately, I never got to see Brutal Truth live, but I've always heard what you just said now, that they are live, that they're just absolutely fucking stunning.
Yeah, they're a typical live band. A band I enjoy more live than on record, because they deliver so much energy live on stage. It's fucking amazing, and you just don't care which songs from which album they play, because they put so much power in their performance. It's amazing.
Yeah,
and of course, Danny Lilka is a fucking legend, by the way.
Awesome, great bassist, and him alongside Shane Embry, I think really innovated, what you can do with the distortion pedal on a bass. But actually, Kevin from Brutal Truth, I'm in the process of trying to set up an interview with him on the show, because he's obviously in a Venomous Concept, and a Venomous Concept are about to put out a new record on Season of Mist pretty soon. So I spoke to Katie, and she's looking to see whether that can be taken care of. But Venomous Concept, incidentally, was on this list also. But I had to invoke the Metal Encyclopedia rule, and they're more of a hardcore punk band rather than a death or a grind band, so I took them out. But I will say, in the interest of full transparency, a band I enjoy a lot more than Brutal Truth. But I agree with you. I think Extreme Conditions Demand Extreme Responses is fucking incredible. I really love Need to Control, the album that came out after that as well. And I didn't mind the experimental stuff on that. Where I minded was when the experimental stuff just sounded like a bunch of drunk or stoned lunatics let loose in a fucking studio to do whatever they want. But what I wanted to ask you was the stench of Prophet. That blast beat that the dude plays, like, the song kind of builds up and it's like da-da, 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 da-da. He does he does almost like the countdown and then the blast. I remember hearing that when I, way back before triggers and everything was the norm, and thinking that was the fucking fastest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. And I'm still blown away whenever I hear it. But what is your take on that as a drummer?
Yeah, like I said, talked about Pete Sandoval. It's just natural drum sound. It's not perfect as if you would use any triggers or studio magic or kind of, I don't know. He just blasted his heart out, and that counts more than any black magic in the studio. Or
How much black magic do you use in the studio?
Not that much. Normally we go over the drum set and use some tom samples, just in case it's one hit wasn't tight enough, and then we replace it with that tom sample, and that's it, actually.
And obviously, I guess you don't need to worry so much about correcting stuff in the studio, because when you've traded your soul to the devil in exchange for your musical powers, things tend to be perfect.
No. Well, I'm not a blaster anyway, so it's kind of under control when we record. So
you have had a couple of blasts, though.
but no gravity blasts and that fast death metal stuff. But it's Just play tight and everything will be fine.
You're not like the drummer from I remember the drummer from Mystifier used to set up like a cymbal. Literally, it would be like above his head and it would be like hanging down.
yeah, I know that.
Like, be blasting like. So they are not on my list, by the way, because I think they're a load of fucking wank. But right, let's get on with it. At number 47, a band who, like, the best way to describe this band is they're kind of like, actually quite a few bands on this list where when they hit unbelievably hard and they are phenomenal. And then unfortunately they bury a lot of that amongst just a plethora of mediocrity. But as I said, when things work, when everything comes together, they are fucking phenomenal. That band is Benediction. So one of the kind of British originals, but really they sort of got buried under the hype and the goodwill towards bands like Bolt Thrower, Napalm Death, Carcass, bands from the same era. But that being said, definitely a band worth looking at. So they've been around since 1989. Their first record was Subconscious Terror, which came out in 1990. I discovered them on a Death is Just the Beginning 3 compilation by Nuclear Blast, which was kind of what got the whole, and I've spoken about it a couple of times in the past, but that's what got that whole Nuclear Blast mail order thing going. Because someone had bought it somewhere, and then there was a like an address you could write to at the end of the video.
Yeah, I know that.
And we wrote to it, like, please send us a mail order catalog, and the rest is history. But Benediction were on there. I can't remember what song that they played, but either way, like I said, been around a while, not being the most active of bands. Their last record came out in 2008. It was called Killing Music. And it featured the vocal stylings of one Dave Cunt Hunt, also of Anel Nathrak. And over the years, they've had Barney Greenway in the band. They've had Nick Barker in the band. What are your thoughts on Benediction?
Well, definitely one of UK's finest in terms of death metal, I would say.
Yeah,
one of the pioneering bands. And like you said, I'm quite sad that Dave Hunt is out of the band now, because he was there from, I think mid-90s until last year, something.
Yeah, so he left
pretty long.
2000 he left last year. You're absolutely right, and he joined in 1998.
And I'm quite happy that Dave Ingram is back in the band, because that's the original singer, and he kind of shaped the sound of Benediction, and I'm looking forward to the future.
Yeah, well, I mean, apparently they're recording a new album, but as I said, it's by their count, we can probably expect that in around 2025.
5 years,
right before Dave Ingram gets placed on dialysis. I'm going to play a track of what I think is the best Benediction record. I'd say I've got two favorite albums. Transcend the Rubicon, which came out in 1993, which is
that's my favorite as well.
I was just about to say that's kind of widely seen as the best. And then the other one that I've developed a soft spot for over the years was Killing Music, which was the last one that they put out. It's the last record to feature Dave Hunt on vocals. I think it's fucking hard as shit. I mean, like every single song on this album is it's kind of like got the same like aggression as Pantera, like Neanderthal aggression, but just put through the English death metal prism. And the track I'm going to play is Dripping with Disgust.
Nature is molded to kill, so say I will be until tripping with disgust. Spread our brain to find our brain. Hypnotic media. Legions devour the brain. Screaming, help me surrender. I'm like a coaches. Being on mud was lost. A poison blade. Contested and tripping with disgust. No room to breathe, no such fantasy. A last gasp, riddled with disease you fail.
Number 46 so this is a band I very seriously debated including whatsoever. And the reason that I did is because the reason I included them was because I grew up to their first two, you could say actually their first three records, and those three albums I still enjoy, even though there's a part of me that knows that they're actually shit.
That's exactly the same way I feel.
and then what they have done afterwards, there's been one or two bright sparks, but for the most part, it's fucking dismal. The band that I am talking about is 6 Feet Under, fronted, of course, by Cannibal Corpse, former Cannibal Corpse vocalist Chris Barnes. Featuring Alan West of Obituary, at least on the first two records, Terry Butler from Massacre, and a whole load of big names. I know Jack Owen, who used to be in Cannibal Corpse, then said that he's retiring from death metal, promptly joined Deicide, then retired from death metal again, then joined 6 Feet Under. So there have been a lot of big names in the band. I don't know why they've not been able to string together, I guess, more consistently good albums. And I don't even want to go into their covers records, those fucking atrocious Graveyard Classics albums. But all of that said, and people are going to go, how on earth are they at 46? And you've just spent the last 5 minutes dumping on the band. There is a smile that is brought to my face when I hear any track off Haunted. There's a smile that comes that stretches from ear to ear anytime that I listen to anything off Warpath. And because of that, they have to be on the list. Revenge of the Zombies. Just the song Warpath, war is coming. Lycanthropy. I remember seeing them play live, and they played almost only tracks off of. This was already, I think, around that fucking shit album that they brought out, where they had. It was called Bringer of Blood. That had America the Brutal.
America with 3K,
yeah. But they basically only did tracks off the first two records, and it was so good. This was before Chris Barnes ran out of breath after every line.
That's a typical example for a live band as well. because if they used to play only the big European festivals, and every time 6 Feet Under was on stage, everybody was going nuts.
Yeah. And the thing is, they're one of those bands where when they play any of those songs live, because they're so simple, I mean, they're really the fucking, pardon the pun, but the antithesis to Origin. In the sense that, you could be brand new to guitar and probably learn most of the riffs off of Haunted in the space of an afternoon. It just works, and because it's so simple, and because of the way that they perform it, it just goes over live so quickly and so well.
Yeah, it's the same with Obituary, for example. It's so fucking simple, but it grooves, and it has this. It keeps the masses going, and it just works for the big audience, or not for the big audience, but for the audience.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've seen Obituary play in front of big audiences, and they fucking ripped it. I mean, they were on which I'm sure you saw that lineup as well, the Slayer farewell tour.
Yeah,
and they were fucking excellent. They should have left a lot of the newer stuff out, but when they played stuff like Cause of Death, or I think they played Dying, and I think they played Chopped in Half. I mean, those songs still fucking level an audience.
Yeah, they work because and you have the appropriate sound level on that songs. It just tears you apart. It's just bam.
Yeah. By the way, so one thing I think is very funny on the 6 Feet Under Wikipedia page, the last entry reads, in recent years, metal fans have criticized vocalist Chris Barnes for his apparent inability to perform the signature vocal style he became famous for. YouTube comments on most songs and recordings of live performances observe Barnes struggling to keep time and often losing breath, in some cases pulling the mic away from his face and dropping his head so that his dreadlocks obscure the movement of him coughing. This is likely due to his marijuana use coupled with a poor diet and lack of physical fitness throughout his life.
That could be, yeah.
I don't know whether that's an ex-wife or someone that went to Wikipedia and wrote that, but I have to say, in fairness, if he ever came on the show, first question I'd ask him is, Chris, do you even lift, bro? For a guy that smokes as much weed as he does, you'd think he'd be, a little more generously proportioned, but not so.
What's lifting? 420, bro.
I lift 420, bro. Anyway, like I said, at the end of the day, it's probably the closest I get to a guilty pleasure. I sometimes feel more guilty about admitting I'm a 6 Feet Under fan than admitting that I love the first Static X album. But this is a song off of the first 6 Feet Under record. The album is called Haunted, and the song is called Lycanthropy.
hunted by the wolf. Now one of us, carnivorous, lost for human flesh, legacy of blood, another victim. Carnivorous, lost for human flesh, legacy of blood, infected dead.
Portion of the top 10 now, because I know the rest, or I think most of the next couple of bands are Marco approved. The first of which I just mentioned that one of their members was in 6 Feet Under. The band is called Massacre. They were formed in 1984. They also featured Alan West of 6 Feet Under and Obituary. And I mean, aside from the fact that I think they've had about 18 or 19 members, they have broken up multiple times. They're not been the most consistent band. I dare say, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, but I feel like if there was more stability in this band, they would have been way, way, way bigger than they ended up being. Because their first record, especially From Beyond, I mean, that came out in 1991. And if you when I listened to it back recently, there is so much on that album that is well ahead of its time. Not to mention the fact that just every single song is a fucking banger, and it still holds up to this day. You know, and they were one of the first bands, maybe with the exception of Nocturnus, that were using keyboards in death metal sparingly but very effectively. You had great performances from everybody, great riffs. They kind of really knew how to mix up speed with a sort of, you know, D-beat, badass chugging and the breakdowns. But it feels like they were in some ways, and it's hard to tell when you look at it from the outside, because you'll never know what was going on in the band. But in many ways, they were almost their own biggest enemies, because had they brought out another 2 to 3 records of the quality of From Beyond, they could have been massive.
Yes, totally agree. But in my opinion, it's some kind of an American problem. So when you look up the metal encyclopedia pages of American bands, see that they have extraordinary. They have just a lot of members. Like every fucking touring band in America has dozens of members, and I think that's keeping them down somehow.
Yeah,
and
I always thought maybe it was Cam Lee's questionable taste in clothing.
Yeah, but you don't see that in Europe. For example, with bands here in Europe, they don't have that many members than they have in US bands.
Unless they're pestilence.
Unless the pestilence.
I think, in my observation, I think it often has to do with usually one particular member in a band, and that one particular member is pissing off all the other members, and typically they that's why you see this rotation. And normally, when you see that level of rotation in a band, the band very often is not going to get anywhere. I don't know an awful lot about Cam Lee, but I mean, what little I do know, I get the impression he's not a particularly easy guy to work with.
Could be.
You've never met him, I think, have you?
No. But I think bands like that, they have one boss, and it seems like they have one boss, and they have employees somehow as the other band members. Yeah, like we know from certain other bands.
But the thing is, sometimes that works. When you have a situation like Danzig, I remember when I asked Glenn about how it worked in the band. He literally just said, "It's my band. Everybody who's in the band knows that it's my band." It's what I say goes. So people can come with their own ideas and they can make suggestions, and that's absolutely fine. But because they know from the start who's in charge, no one feels slighted when their ideas aren't selected. None of that sort of thing. Things just go on as normal.
Yeah, but that's not my definition of a band. A band, in my definition, should be a bunch of friends that are having fun and playing music.
Yeah. Obviously, if it's a metal band, then they sacrificing cats and
of course, and little children,
old women.
Yeah.
But I hear what you're saying. But I think you will have more of there's more of a chance of having that. That's because people always tend to organize into hierarchies. I really do believe that. You see any sort of group at work or whatever, and there'll always be someone that kind of emerges as the de facto leader. Yeah. And I think if you throw in artistic personality quirks, to put it mildly, into normal human structure, and we're not going to get into fucking evolutionary theory and shit. Yeah, but I think you do have. You do have a recipe for that sort of thing to happen. I don't know what your thoughts are. I mean, you're a very quirky musician yourself. Yeah,
but that's why I'm a fan of flat hierarchies. Like everyone's equal
in a band, because I'm not a communist, so I wouldn't know. I wouldn't acknowledge that in the rest of the world.
Of course, in a band, in a company, it wouldn't work, of course. But
So how does it work with you and Dave? Do you if Dave comes up with something and it's a total pile of shit? But he's adamant. Like he says to you, Marco, this is the best thing I've ever written in my life. And then he starts playing it, and it sounds like the new Corey Taylor single, CMFT. It's like,
no, we are constantly fighting because I'm a really direct guy.
Yeah,
and I always tell him, no, man, that doesn't work. That's not how it works. That sounds like shit, and then he's usually depressed and a bit sad, but in the end we will work it out. So
that just gave me an idea for a T-shirt, by the way. We can have, that black metal picture that you have on your email. I think it's your Gmail icon. It's like I think it's you in corpse paint.
Yes, that one. Yeah.
So we can have that instead of the current the current character that we have. And then just right at the bottom, Scheiße.
Scheiße. Verdammte Scheiße.
That could be the limited edition Marco T-shirt.
Limited one.
Yeah. But yeah, I think Massacre for me, I think, the first record in particular, absolutely fantastic. I think the comeback album was decent as well.
May I choose the next song?
Absolutely fucking not. Here's your first taste of a flat hierarchy. Yes, you may, young Marco.
Okay. Then I choose Corpse Grinder.
At number 44, another band who their position on this list has changed many times, and I kind of have to remind myself that I only really like 2 records that they put out, and much of the rest of their output I regard to be false metal. But especially one album. We'll touch on that in a second. So at number 44, Carcass. I would imagine of everything that I've done on this list, this will probably be one of the most controversial, because for a lot of people, Carcass is the greatest death metal band ever. I don't personally think so, but we'll explain why in a second. So a primer on Carcass again. They started in 1985 in Liverpool. They have gone through multiple lineup changes, and the only remaining original members are Bill Steer and Jeff Walker. They have, however, boasted many famous folk who've gone on to play in bands like Arch Enemy, Napalm Death, and I believe that Jeff is now also a permanent member of Brujeria, who I debated putting on this list, but again, I don't really see them as death metal. Walker and Steer reveal their weakness by professing to both be vegetarians. So that immediately, that's the first thing that suggests to me we're dealing with people that at the core are false. But they put out their first record in 1988 called Reek of Putrefaction, and then my 2 favorites, Symphonies of Sickness, that came out in 1989, Necroticism, Descanting the Insulabrius in 1991, which I personally think is the peak of that band. And I think it's so good. It's kind of like, the way I am with Judas Priest, for example. I can take or leave most things that Judas Priest have put out, but Painkiller, I think, is a perfect record. So Descanting the Insulabrius, I think, is a masterpiece. Heartwork came out in, I think, 1994 or 1993. That to me was a grim disappointment. Most people liked it because, it was melodic and they liked the riffs. And for me, it was like, and then the one of the most false pseudo death metal piles of shit ever came out, Swan Song. They then broke up. Surgical Steel, everyone was raving about. I listened to the album about 1.5 times, and that was about as much as I could stand. But they have earned their spot based on 2 records. So what's your take on the band?
Never was a big fan, but I liked Symphonies of Sickness, and actually that's it.
You don't like Descanting the Insulabrius?
I'm not sure about that. I'm going to think that possibly you're false. That could be, but I was never quite into them.
Yeah,
and but I heard Symphonies of Sickness, and I quite liked it, but I didn't get obsessed by it.
Yeah.
And I saw them live with what was it? Napalm Death, Sodom, and Voivod. Few years ago.
Interesting lineup.
4 or 5 years ago, and It's
did nothing for you.
No.
For me, like Surgical Steel is a great example of a band who can do, you know, like they can set their guitars to like the heaviest setting imaginable. They can play fast. They can throw in as much double bass as they want. They can scream and yell and do death metal vocals. There's just the spirit of like real anger and aggression is just not there. Like I listened to that record and I just got nothing from it. Nothing. There's like when I listen to death metal, for the most part, you know, I want to hear convincing violence, and you just you just don't hear it on anything that they did after their third album. It's just not there, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think so as well. It's never was a huge fan, and they've owned their spot in the music world for sure. But but for other people, not me. But
if they showed up in Luxembourg, you'd yell "Death to false metal" as soon as they come on the stage, or "Scheiße." Anyway, right. Let us play a track by Carcass. I mean, this is the song that got me into them. If you're not into them, this should be the track that gets you certainly into the album. Of Dissenting the Insalubrious. Which I may have raped the pronunciation of that album, but it's not important enough for me to get it right. So this is called Corporal Jigsaw Quandary. on to another band who are on this list almost entirely by virtue of the strength of one record, but it is an almost perfect album. So the band in question, Edge of Sanity, one of these kind of old school Swedish death metal bands, definitely one of the bands who pioneered the Swedish sound and that really kind of dry, hissy Swedish death metal guitar sound that was prevalent in the early 90s. Their early stuff, I think, it's not bad, and I've gone back and I've listened to it, and I think it's good. It doesn't hold a candle to, anything old that you'll listen to by Entombed or Hypocrisy or anything like that. But it has its moments, and then somehow kind of I don't know what happened. Whether Dan Swano, who was really the leader in the band, whether he did the same thing that you did prior to starting Stellar Master Elite, which is to sell his soul to the devil. But he came up with a 40-minute concept or single-track concept record called Crimson, which I just think is absolutely extraordinary. It completely holds up to this day. And if you've not heard it yet, then it is something that you absolutely need to add to your list of things to do. It is fucking stunning. Over to this young lad in Luxembourg. Marco, what's your thoughts?
I'm in Germany.
You're not in Luxembourg?
I work in Luxembourg.
Okay. That's the confusion. It doesn't matter. It's all the same, innit?
It is. It's only 30 kilometers away, but...
Well, there you go. It's no different to me living in Surbiton and saying I work in London.
Yes,
but the thing is, though, mate, one thing that you won't have on me, I live on the mean streets of Surbiton.
The mean streets. Oh, sorry.
Sometimes people don't even hoot when their Teslas whiz by.
I mean, Dan Swano is of course a great musician, but in terms of Edge of Sanity, I'm with Carcass. I never got into it. Somehow, I can remember the album. What was it called? Spectral
Crimson.
Sorrows.
Crimson. Crimson is the one that you're trying to think about, mate.
Yeah.
I'm talking rubbish. But...
Crimson. No, I'm really familiar with the Spectral Sorrows, for example, and but. Was cool to listen to, but nothing that's really grabbed my attention.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for me, I think Crimson, first of all, what took me by surprise was that somebody would even have the balls, certainly in 1996, to put out in death metal, put out a single track 40-minute album. I mean, they've since split it up into different songs. But it was progressive, it was experimental, it was heavy. It featured a turn by Michael Ackerfeld from Opeth back before he turned false. And it was just a perfect song. I mean, and for me to say that about a concept track like that is something, because I detest concept albums, like overtly concept records. I don't like stories being told. Unless your name is King Diamond, stay away from the fucking stories. If I want to read a story, I'll read a book. The only really cool concept record is The Wrong One to Fuck With by Dying Fetus. But I like I said, for me that record is so fucking brilliant, and it's not something that certainly at the time that it came out, it wasn't it wasn't something that anyone who knew me would go, man, Jack, you'd really like this. But something about it just clicked, and I absolutely adored it. So at number 43, Edge of Sanity, and I'm going to play the first part of the Crimson track off the album. Shockingly enough, Crimson, just in case you dozed off. So here goes.
Another sky.
on now to our second to last selection for this episode. And you actually got me listening to this band again when you mentioned using the cover art for one of their records as the thumbnail for my hi-fi episode, which is available right now on YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or SoundCloud. The band is called Asphyx. The album that you were referring to was The Rack. Asphyx started back in 1987 in the Netherlands, wherein many hundreds of years prior, I have some distant relatives who lived there. I was really amazed when I listened to this again. And firstly, I'm questioning whether I'm developing Alzheimer's, because I was thinking to myself, how the fuck did I forget this band when I drafted this list originally? And secondly, like even on a record like The Rack, which is still, which is now relatively old, how the fuck that band was so brutal and so aggressive. Like they literally, the only death metal band I can think of that tops that, to like where the point where it's so heavy and aggressive that you think that they're not going to be able to, you won't be able to listen to this on conventional sound equipment, is Dying Fetus. But yeah, mate, like I said, you sent me straight down an old school rabbit hole, and I was just completely blown away when I heard what I heard. The other thing that I was so impressed with is, I mean, even though The Rack came out in 1991, the production is so fucking thick and mean.
Yeah, true. Let me just check where they recorded.
So I know it came. I know it came out in 1991 on Century Media, and in terms of where it was recorded, I suspect it was recorded somewhere in the Netherlands.
Yes. It's Harrow Productions in Losser, Netherlands. Never heard of that, but they certainly did a great job.
Yeah, fantastic. And your views on Asphyx generally?
It's of course, if you are European and the metal fan, you should know Asphyx, because they're one of the all-time classics here. Yeah. And one death metal band you definitely should know. Just because of the vocals of Martin van Droen.
Yeah. Well,
which
who
is
also
great,
in Pestilence.
Yeah.
He's not, although I don't like him as much as Patrick Mameli, but he's a very good and very capable vocalist. But around the time where those bands were coming out, it was kind of I wouldn't call it a competition, but there definitely was division between, I think, people that were really heavily into the European bands like Entombed and Dismember and bands like that, and people that were into the Florida scene. Yeah. I guess, what was your experience of that? You're younger than I am, I think. So
yes.
You may not recall that vividly, but your view on the Florida versus the European scene.
European scene for me was, even though I didn't experience it at first hand, but European scene was for me always a bit more dirty.
Yeah,
a bit more into the gore and the sound was different as well. If you compare a Morris sound recording to some European recording, it's different worlds.
It's interesting for me to see how much of a comeback that Sunlight Studio sound is busy making now in production. Like I think Gatecreeper, their new record, had that sound. Entrails sounded exactly like that. Yeah. There's a lot of bands that seem to be going back to that sound, and I mean, it stands to reason that sound still to this day is very, very cool. Like if you listen to Clandestine by Entombed, the album still sonically sounds fucking excellent.
Yes.
Whereas a lot of the Morris Sound albums kind of sound really thin, very trebly. There's no real beef in the mid-range.
Yeah, but that was the standard in the early 90s, and you always know when you hear a Morris Sound recording, and that's some kind of standalone trademark of that studio, and you know that that's a whole generation of death metal heads are used to.
Yeah, it's like the Saturday Night Live cowbell sketch. Jim Morris is like, we need more treble. Like plays the song again, like, all right, turn that mid range, turn the bass all the way down, more treble.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, right. So as far as Asphyx is concerned, question for you: have you seen Asphyx play live? I would assume.
Oh yes, several times. Yes.
And what is Van Drunen like on stage?
Exactly the same as on the records. It's his
sounds
vocals
like
are fucking massive. Yes, true.
So
the cool thing about him is that he's like Tom Araya, and he's always smiling and going with the crowd. And
you know my views on smiles. I don't approve of smiling on stage.
Not in terms of death metal. That's fucking charming.
No smiles. No dedicating songs to friends. No
but
jokes.
You like Slayer, do you?
Yeah, but that's different though, because
no, it's not.
Firstly, because he's Tom Araya, he can do whatever he wants. Secondly, he does still sound, or he does seem quite menacing though when he smiles. You know, when he does.
Yeah, same with Van Drunen, and he's talking his jokes.
Next thing you're gonna tell me that Angela Gosso, when she's doing her dances with Arch Enemy, those she did like literally like. It was like she was at like a fucking 1985 disco. She's like, dancing and then like.
I hate that band so much.
They're not on my list, by the way, whatsoever. They have literally one song I like, and everything else, again, filed under false. Same as In Flames. They have no songs that I like. But anyway, speaking of a song that I do like, off the very first Asphyx record, this is a song called Vermin.
Also discuss unrealistic, roaming at night, red eyes glaring. Apparitions of the darkest god, leaders rodents. Best of the modern agglomeration, living terror. Indestructible abominations. Moving out diseases. The number of infected ones increases. Inimical towards the human race. Death is most efficient way. Ghastly creatures enticed by decayed filth. Objective factors crawling in fermenting dirt. Seed of infection wallowing in stinking slime. Malicious horror, still unaffected by time. Immortal enemy, several populations and practice corpses lie in the alleys, defeating cadavers, rotting away, living covered with barracles, burning, infested with all the decay. Rodents, best of the modern agglomeration, living terror, indestructible abominations. terminal diseases. Number of infected ones increases. Inimical towards the human race. Death is most efficient way.
So before we get to the final pick of the first part of my top 50 death metal selection, let's quickly do a tally of where we're at. So at number 50, I have Terrorizer. At number 49, I have Origin. At number 48, I've got Brutal Truth. At number 47, I've got Benediction. At number 46, 6 Feet Under. Number 45, Massacre. Number 44, Carcass. Number 43, Edge of Sanity. And number 42, Asphyx, which brings me to number 41, Necrophagia. I'll have you talk about them first before I go into the background on them, because I have to admit, Necrophagia was a band that I kind of got to much later on in my life, because in South Africa, when I was getting into death metal, I was still probably a little more reliant on the stuff that was freely available in shops. By the time that we were ordering things from Nuclear Blast, I was already well on my way to being a black metal man. So, the stuff like Roadrunner was quite well distributed in South Africa. So any Obituary, Deicide, stuff like that, you could get quite easily. Same with Pestilence, same with some Napalm Death and some Bolt Thrower. But bands like Necrophagia, so anything that's, that was really kind of cult and underground, you didn't really get. And, by the time that I was in a position where I could have bought them mail order, I was not really, all that interested in death metal anymore. But when I did discover them later on, obviously, absolutely loved them. So your thoughts on them?
Well, sorry.
You will be sorry for coughing on my show. Anyway,
probably one of the strangest death metal bands ever, in my opinion.
Yeah,
because the topics of Killjoy and the overall look of the Necrophagia albums are just completely out of a horror movie.
Yeah,
and that's what I always loved. And I was glad enough to see them live at Hellfest with Killjoy on vocals. And that was one of the greatest death metal gigs I ever saw. That was just fucking amazing.
Oh, really? Yeah, that's. I'm very sorry. I never got a chance to see that. Killjoy. Tell me what you think of this. But especially now that I've been going back over the back catalog and looking up a lot of stuff with him, he kind of reminds me of death metal's version of Rob Zombie.
Yes, that's true. Yeah,
he's kind of definitely like a character in his own right, and I loved how. From way before any other band was really doing it, certainly way before Mortician was doing it, Necrophagia was bringing in the samples and, bringing it in such a way that it fit and it sounded really cool. It sounded corny, but like in all the right ways. And then they also have, with a lot of their riffing, this to me is true, especially of some of their later records, there's kind of like an industrial feel to it. So on the last record that they put out as an example, the first track is called Reborn in Black Mass, which is a fucking masterpiece. But there's kind of like a real sort of industrial chug to the riff, even though it's very distinctly death metal.
Yeah.
But it's like a real sort of so I can also, from that perspective, I can see why they would sound so cool live, because they'd have these sort of simplistic, very rhythmic kind of riffs. That just live would go over, much better than a band that's playing a, 237 beats per minute, and the guy's playing as many notes as well at the same time.
Yeah, that's true. It's the simplicity and the over sick atmosphere of the songs and the recordings as well. It's just something really unique, and I think I missed that from many bands of that genre, of that horror death metal. They were just because Necrophagia was just so twisted and genuinely sick that I can't describe it really well. But
as I work my way through this list, I think what a lot of people are going to notice is that there's not an awful lot of newer bands on this list. I think in terms of bands that started beyond 1995, I'd say maybe about 15 to 20% of the bands on here are. And I do feel like whereas as black metal continued to evolve and continue to get, I think the palette from whence black metal musicians record and make music got a lot broader. I think death metal just seemed to sort of lose its way a little bit. And I think a lot of that uniqueness and that character made way for an extraordinary amount of, technical proficiency, which is cool on one hand, but for me...
But sounds all the same now.
I was about to say, it loses its novelty when everybody's doing it. And then very clinical production as well. There's some production jobs that I've heard recently that I think are very cool. I feel like some bands, over the last, say, 5-6 years, maybe a little bit longer, but some bands have really started making a concerted effort to return to proper songwriting. But there's an awful lot of death metal that, certainly between kind of, I'd say 2000 and 2011, 2012, where the albums would just go by in a blur. And you would think after you've heard it, this sounds good, but you wouldn't be able to point out a single track on the album, which, any Necrophagia album, you most certainly could do that, right? Straight after the first listen. And that's true, I'd say, of a big chunk of the bands on this list, if not everybody. We mentioned Entombed, and I remember hearing Clandestine for the first time, and I mean, that is, every single song is so memorable and such a fucking ripper. You can't help but hum along to it in the shower after you've heard it the first time. I mean, obviously in my case, suggesting to the girls that I was seeing at school that we listen to it while we make out. But any last words on Necrophagia before we play a track?
Yeah, like I said, unique sound, unique bands, unique frontman that's left us too early, unfortunately.
Only 51 when he passed away. Yeah. And I don't think that the cause of death was ever released. I would say probably communism.
Probably.
No, let's not joke about that. But no, it was sad. And one fact that we didn't discuss is that the band actually kind of got back together and got back to making music thanks to one Philip Anselmo.
Yes.
Who have you ever heard Phil Anselmo do Day of Suffering, the Morbid Angel track?
Yeah, I saw the YouTube video.
Fucking cool does that sound?
That guy is a monster.
Yeah, big time.
Seriously.
And on that same series of YouTube clips, I think it's from the same show, they do a cover of Seek and Destroy, where
I didn't see that.
Oh, dude, I'll send it to you. We've got Dimebag. I think Dimebag does a lot of the vocals. There's the cover of Whiplash where Dimebag does the vocals. On this one,
nice.
It's Jason and Jason Newsted actually comes on stage, and Phil is doing some of the vocals for Seek and Destroy. Nice. Fuck, dude, it is so fucking cool. Because it's got obviously Kirk is a great guitarist. Lars not so much a good drummer, but when you've got the guitar and drum duo of Vinny and Dime. And then you got Phil, being a total badass on stage, and you've got Jason doing his thing. It just sounds so cool.
That's perfect match.
Yeah. Anyway, right. This is going to be a track off of the first Necrophagia album that came out in 1987. Came out actually 6 months before Scream Bloody Gore. So it's one of the first death metal albums ever released. It is still fucking hard as shit. as you will agree when you hear the song. This is called Bleeding Torment.
Taking away your sacred light, in many ways I shall describe. Supplication together is a twist of the knife. Nihilism reigning deep inside. Lacerate your skin, ripping from the bones. Asphyxiated gargles, you struggle, suffer.
So that's part one of my epic, hard as fuck, top 50 death metal countdown in the books. Thank you very much for coming on, mate.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah, always good to talk to you. And I am looking forward to hearing some new stuff from you guys, mate. So best tell Dave to get his priorities in order.
As soon as possible.
So I'm still at some point. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I am going to convince you to play live. I don't know how, but I don't know when. I don't know when. But you guys need to play a show at least once.
One day it will happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. I know. Obviously you can't drum and vocal at the same time, but
no.
I mean, you can get a vocalist.
Yeah, or a drummer.
Yeah. Would you vocal?
I think I would feel quite uncomfortable
being at the front.
without anything to do, you know. And, it would feel strange. No, we get a vocalist.
Yeah. you need like a Till Lindemann type dude to play Stellar Master Elite stuff, like, you know, ripped and fucking steroided up, standing on stage.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. No, but definitely one day it will happen, and if it's just one show, then it is like that. But I really want to do that, and yeah. God knows when.
Because I just feel like so many songs on on Hologram Temple and on the third record especially, they just go over live so well. Yeah, because they've got the groove, they've got the
despite being the songs being really long, you know.
Yeah.
And, yeah,
that's fine, if Ruins of Everest can pull off a 15-minute track live, then you can do it.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. No, but
that
really
would be
one
a good
day.
vocalist, by the way. Alexander, imagine him.
That's something to think about. Yeah,
I was about to say, I help make dreams happen, mate. So then I've got his email address. I can send it to you if you want to reach out to him. Hello, Marco. I believe you and I both have the distinct privilege of having been on Into the Necrosphere. Would you please sing if we play live?
Oh, okay.
So I'm sure you'd say that's absolutely fine. But cool, dude. Listen, it's such a pleasure to see you again, and I'm glad to see you keeping well and keeping head above water, and hopefully catch up with you again very, very soon. All right. Thank you. And like I said, I spoke about it on social media, but we bookended this past week the 1 year anniversary of the first attempt at you and I trying to speak, which is the first of about 15 or 20. We have to celebrate that soon in London. Yeah, we'll do, man. Or at your new place, or wherever in the countryside I'm going to go and live. That's won't be disclosed, because now that I've done the hi-fi rack tour. I'm sleeping with a baseball bat under the bed in case some ne'er-do-well metal guy tries to come and steal my shit. But I know my speakers are too heavy for most people to carry, mate. So not for me, obviously, because I'm back in the gym now and hard as fuck. But anyway, all right, brother. Take care of yourself. Okay, take care. Bye. Bye. There you have it. Part 1 of my countdown of my top 50 favorite death metal bands is in the bank, and I hope you guys enjoyed that. Hit me up with some of your favorites. If you think that I was unnecessarily harsh on any bands, or that I, put bands lower down the list that should have possibly have been higher, let me know. Keen to hear everybody's thoughts. I do know that when it comes to death metal, my tastes tend to be fairly specific, and anything that veers on that kind of classic new wave of British heavy metal melody that you see or that you hear in bands like Arch Enemy, Amon Amarth, bands like that, they just don't cut it for me. I like death metal to be fucking nasty as shit. But I had a brilliant time with Marco as always. I will concede and say we were probably silly geese to a slightly extreme degree, considering the fact that for many of these bands we're supposed to be paying tribute to them. But I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed recording it. And as I said at the top of the show, next week I've got Kevin Sharp of Brutal Truth, Venomous Concept, and Lockup on the show with me. The week after, I have got AV from Abduction. He's going to be making a return. I think he was last on the show on episode 5 or 6. So having him on is going to be awesome. They're just about to release a new split. He's just about to release a new split, I should say. So we'll talk about that and then just catch up about various things in general. And then, like I said, I've got a bunch of feelers out to get guests to co-host the death metal specials with me. So those will be coming up over the next couple of weeks as well. So that is more or less today's show done. Wherever you are, whatever you're up to at the moment, thank you very much for your support. From the mean streets of Surbiton on the outskirts of London, I am wishing you a fucking awesome week and a fond farewell.